my son Roderick and my husband David. I watched them hurriedly leave the house. Since it's Sunday, I thought I'd take it easy until Roderick came back. As I was hanging up the laundry, I heard the phone ring. "Hello, is this the home of Roderick?" A woman's voice came from the other side of the line. "Is this Roderick's family?" "Yes." I couldn't grasp the situation, but my heart started to race. "This is Ainsworth from Johns Hopkins Hospital. Roderick has been in an accident and has been brought here for emergency treatment." I felt my vision blur. The Roderick who just left the house so cheerfully. "We are about to perform emergency surgery. Hello? Are you okay?" The woman, who introduced herself as Ainsworth, asked, sensing my silence. "Yes, the hospital, right?" "Johns Hopkins Hospital. Please come immediately." "Yes," I replied quickly and hung up the phone. I have to get to the hospital quickly. As I got ready, I tried to contact David, but he didn't answer even after several calls. I called David's office. I explained the situation and asked them to connect me to David. However, they said David had not come to the office today. For now, I decided to head to the hospital. I kept telling myself that everything would be all right, and as I was about to leave the house, someone burst in. I was so surprised that I couldn't recognize who it was at first. "Mom, I forgot my sandwich." Seeing my surprise, Roderick looked at me with concern. "Mom? Did I surprise you by coming back suddenly?" A swirl of emotions flooded through me. "Mom." Tears began to fall from my eyes. "Mom? What's wrong?" "My name is Jeannie. I'm a 45-year-old housewife with a husband and a son. I graduated from the local high school and attended culinary school, but I didn't pursue a career in hotels or restaurants. Instead, I worked part-time at a fast food shop. My classmates went on to open their own restaurants or became famous chefs after years of hard work. But I didn't acquire any notable skills. However, I have no regrets. I now have a precious family. It may be a common story, but I'm happy. While working part-time at the fast food shop, I met my husband David. The shop I worked at also did deliveries, and I was in charge of them. David worked at one of the companies I delivered to. Since David ordered fast food almost every day, I assumed he was single, but I never imagined he would ask me out. Seeing my confusion when he asked for my contact information, David handed me a piece of paper with his number on it. Even then, I didn't know what to do and didn't contact him. I thought things might become awkward, but David's attitude didn't change, so I gradually started to be aware of him. One day, when I went to deliver as usual, I didn't see David, and I realized I felt lonely. After a week of not seeing David, I decided to text the number he had given me. "I haven't seen you lately. Are you all right?" Even though it was just one sentence, I remember being extremely nervous. Will I ever get a reply? Maybe he doesn't even think about me anymore. While I was thinking that, a reply came late at night. It was nothing special, he had just been on a business trip. "I'll be back at the office next week, so please get me some delicious fast food then." Even though I wasn't the one making it, I felt happy. I couldn't wait for the short 2-day weekend to end and for Monday to come. And then, Monday. I took extra care in getting ready that day. I took an order, prepared the fast food to deliver to David's company, and headed there with a pounding heart. The moment I saw David, whom I hadn't seen in a while, my heart raced. My hands were trembling as I handed the fast food to David. After taking the payment, David quietly said, "Thank you for the text. Can I text you again?" I nodded vigorously. "See you then." David smiled and walked away. Watching his retreating figure, I realized I had fallen in love with him. From then on, David and I started keeping in touch, eventually dating, and then getting married. After our wedding, I continued working part-time for a while but quit when I became pregnant. Thus, I became a housewife, and my days were filled with household chores for my husband and our son, Roderick. It wasn't easy, but I found it fulfilling. Roderick grew up healthy, and we became a picture-perfect happy family. It was around the time Roderick started middle school. David, who had been earning enough to support me and Roderick, got news of another promotion. Assistant director, they say. David mentioned with a sigh during our usual evening drink. That's amazing! While I was delighted, David seemed troubled. Aren't you happy? Since I had never worked in an office, I thought promotions were something to be happy about, but maybe it wasn't so simple. Well, yeah, I'm happy, David murmured, looking somewhat lonely. I'm sorry, I got excited all by myself. There must be something I don't understand. I thought it wasn't something to delve into deeply. Then David slowly began to talk. I'll be even busier. More business trips too. His voice was almost like a child's, seeking comfort. I'll miss you. Was he worried about me? Before we got married, David's job was quite demanding, with frequent business trips, overtime, and working on weekends. And I often expressed my loneliness. It wasn't just because I was young. I had made David worry a lot. Despite that, David's sincere responses eventually made me feel secure, and I became okay with not seeing him for days. David still remembered those times and sometimes checked my expression. Oh, I'm fine now. I have Roderick too. I tried to sound as cheerful as possible. No matter how busy you are, I'll be here waiting for you, and I'll keep this home a place where you can always feel at ease. I see. Finally looking at me, David smiled. Sensing my determination, David said nothing more. Later, David's promotion was confirmed, and we celebrated at home. Roderick was happy too, and seeing David's relieved face, I felt at ease and made a new resolve. I will make our family bond even stronger. I thought so. Ever since David got promoted to assistant director, he had been working weekends and taking short business trips. But life hadn't changed much. However, soon he started going on long business trips far away. Every time he came home, David was exhausted and often went straight to bed without eating. If he was like this at home, how was he managing on his trips? Was he eating properly? Was he getting enough sleep? While David was away, I couldn't stop worrying. But David texted and called every day, so I didn't let my anxiety show. Besides, on his days off, he would go fishing with Roderick or make time for family. And I felt that David was trying to prioritize his family. I have to accept and support David no matter what. That's what I thought. By the time I got used to David's long trips, Roderick had started high school. This would probably reduce my burden a little. To avoid worrying David and to enjoy my own time, I thought about starting a new hobby. Just as I was thinking that, the phone in the house rang. It was 8 p.m. Roderick was still out at his club activities. Could it be David calling from his trip? Why was he calling the house instead of my cell phone? Hello. I answered the phone cheerfully. But there was no response from the other end. Hello? I called out again, puzzled. Still, there was no sound from the other end. Prank calls even now. I sighed and hung up the receiver. Then, I heard a clattering sound from the yard. When I looked out into the yard, I saw an empty can rolling around. Our yard is fenced, so unless someone threw it, there shouldn't be an empty can rolling in. Not even on windy days did this happen. That was the end of it for that day, but silent calls and trash thrown into the yard continued occasionally. Not only that, strange letters started appearing in the mailbox. The letters were filled with the word curse, which was creepy. Wondering what to do, I first consulted with the neighbors, who told me that sometimes local elementary school kids play pranks. They said not to worry too much about it, and I agreed. Thinking that kids always play pranks, I tried not to mind the ongoing mischief. Would elementary school kids really make prank calls at 8 p.m.? With that doubt lingering in my mind, a year passed, and then things took a sudden turn. It was a Sunday. Roderick had his club activities, and David was getting ready for a long business trip the next day. So our house was bustling from the morning. I made sandwiches for Roderick and watched as the two of them rushed out of the house after breakfast. No sooner had I thought phew, I started the washing machine and began cleaning. It was Sunday, so it would be crowded everywhere. I decided to relax until Roderick came back. As I was hanging the freshly washed laundry, I heard the phone ring inside the house. It was just past 8 o'clock. Who could be calling at this hour? I thought it might be another prank call and hesitantly picked up the phone. Hello, is this Roderick's residence? A woman's voice came from the other end. She sounds like she's in a hurry, speaking a bit fast. Yes, it is, I replied cautiously. Is this Roderick's family? Yes. I couldn't understand the situation, but my heart started to race. My name is Ainsworth from Johns Hopkins Hospital. Roderick has just been in an accident and has been rushed here. My vision blurred. The Roderick who left home full of energy this morning. We're going to perform emergency surgery now. Hello? Are you all right? The woman who introduced herself as Ainsworth asks me, receiving no response. Yes, the hospital, right? Calm down, me. I try to tell myself, but it's not working. Noticing my confusion, perhaps used to situations like this, Ainsworth speaks to me in a calm voice. Johns Hopkins Hospital. Please come immediately. Yes. I reply hastily and hang up the phone. I understand the situation, but my emotions can't keep up. But I have to get to the hospital quickly. As I get dressed, I call David. I know I need to stay strong, but this is too big to handle alone. And Roderick is in a critical condition. I didn't want to worry David, but not telling him seemed wrong. Despite my internal excuses, I simply wanted to hear David's voice to ease my anxiety. However, no matter how many times I called David's phone, there was no answer. I debated texting, but if he didn't notice the calls, he probably wouldn't notice the text right away either. Maybe he stopped by the office before his trip. I decided to call David's office. Even though it's Sunday, someone might be working overtime. I explained the situation to the person who answered and asked them to pass the message to David. But to my shock, David hadn't gone to work and had no business trip planned. Already panicking about Roderick, now I had no idea where David was. I took a deep breath to calm myself. For now, I needed to head to the hospital. David's situation could be a communication mix-up. I decided to text him and wait for his reply. It's okay. I decided to protect this family and our home. Repeating this to myself, I was about to leave when someone rushed in. I was so startled that I couldn't recognize who it was at first. Mom! I forgot my sandwich! Noticing my shock, Roderick looked at me with concern. Mom? Did I scare you by coming back suddenly? Confusion, relief, doubt. Various emotions swirled within me. Seeing Roderick's face, I started to calm down. Roderick was right in front of me. I cupped his face with my hands to confirm. Tears fell from my eyes. Mom?
What's wrong?
Seeing Roderick's panic made me smile. Roderick was okay. I slowly began to regain my composure. I told my club I'd be late, so I've got time. What happened? Seeing my tears, Roderick was concerned. When did he grow so big and kind? As I thought that, I explained about the call I received this morning.
I was in an accident, but I'm so full of energy,
Roderick said, jumping up and down to show it. He was trying to make me laugh and reassure me. For now, how about calling the hospital to check? It could be someone else with the same name. Roderick has always been such a responsible kid. I walked towards the living room, where the phone is, accompanied by Roderick. I dialed the number of the hospital that I had noted down earlier. Earlier, I received a call that Roderick had been taken to the emergency room. I'm his mother. I tell the woman who answers the phone. Now, what was the name of the person who called me earlier? As I try to recall, the hold music stops, and the woman's voice comes back on the line. Thank you for waiting. I'm sorry, but we have no record of anyone named Roderick being brought in.
What?
I exclaim in surprise, my voice sounding strange. I apologize briefly to the woman on the phone and hang up.
So, the hospital said they didn't know anything about it, huh?
Roderick sighs. I'm sorry. I was really panicking. I start to feel apologetic. No, Mom, it's not your fault. If you heard that I was taken to the hospital, of course, you'd be surprised. Actually, I'd be sad if you didn't worry. Roderick is smiling.
But still, why would someone make such a prank call? Could it be some kind of scam?
Roderick seems to be analyzing the situation calmly. Please, stop. Anyway, I'm just glad you're okay. Feeling more at ease, I move towards the front door to see Roderick off once again. Here, take this sandwich. You said you'd be late for your club, so you don't have time to dawdle. However, Roderick just looks at me, not moving. Roderick? What's wrong? I'm fine now. Before I can finish, Roderick interrupts. Isn't there something else that's bothering you? His eyes lock onto mine, and I feel I can't escape. This is more important than any club. Please, tell me. He's no longer the child I thought he was, but a mature adult standing before me. I tell Roderick about the pranks we've been experiencing.
This call was just another prank. Really, it's so malicious.
As I recall everything, a sense of unease rises within me. Garbage thrown into the yard, creepy letters sent to the house. Why do we have to go through this? Sensing my unease, Roderick makes a call on his phone. Mom, I'm going to skip the club today. Given everything that's happened, the person who called might even be watching you now. Roderick smiles reassuringly at me.
But you have a game coming up.
I can't let some prank get in the way of what my son wants to do. I have to handle this on my own.
It's okay, Mom.
Roderick seems unconcerned, despite my worry. I know he's trying to make sure I don't push myself too hard. Today's just a practice. It's going to be short, and not everyone is attending anyway. Then, he sits down on the living room sofa. Are you really okay?
Yeah.
Roderick sits on the sofa and immediately seems lost in thought. I'll make some tea. It seems like he doesn't hear me. When Roderick is focused on something, he tunes out everything else. What could he be thinking about? Maybe how to deal with the pranks. After setting the tea in front of him, Roderick turns to me and starts to speak. I was planning to keep this from you, Mom, but maybe it's related to what's happening now. His voice was small, almost a whisper. Do you know something? Roderick nodded quietly and began to speak slowly.
Please, stay calm while I tell you this.
He prefaced, then shared a story that was hard to believe. David might be having an affair. It happened the day I went on a day trip with my friends. Roderick had come home early from school due to exams. He saw David coming out of the house with a young woman. David, flustered, said he just came to get something he forgot while on his rounds. He claimed the woman was just a colleague and quickly left. But on another day, when Roderick was returning from a club trip to the neighboring town and went into a restaurant with his friends, he saw David arguing with the woman. It was the same woman from the house. The way they argued didn't seem like a boss and subordinate. Hearing this, I felt a growing sense of dread. But I want to believe in David. He's always considerate, ensuring I don't feel lonely. He wouldn't betray me like that. Thank you for telling me, Roderick. But I still want to trust Dad.
I thought you'd say that.
Roderick smiled a little. If you're here, Roderick, could I go and rest for a bit? I'm feeling quite tired. I turned my back to the nodding Roderick and headed to the bedroom. I thought about lying down but couldn't shake off Roderick's story. I reached for David's desk drawer in our bedroom. It's fine. There's nothing. He wouldn't betray me. Still, I needed something concrete. Inside the drawer was David's planner. He usually carried it with him. Why would he forget it today of all days? With trembling hands, I opened it. I checked the page where he wrote his monthly plans and the section for today's date. I kept checking the date over and over, but it was clear a heart was drawn on today's date. When I called his office, they said he wasn't on a business trip. I couldn't reach him. The pieces started to come together. What do I want to do? I still want to believe in David. That's why I need to know the truth. Determined, I took out my phone to text David and couldn't help but laugh. The text about Roderick being taken to the hospital was still unsent. I never thought it would come to this. I felt that today might be a turning point in my life. I contacted your office, David. I know you're not on a trip, so please come home quickly. I sent the text and decided to rest for a while. About an hour later, David came home. He seemed angry. I heard him stomping around noisily. When I went downstairs, he came towards me and started yelling.
Why did you contact my office without asking me first? Do you not trust me?
He was angry without even hearing my side. David has a bad habit of getting angry when things don't go his way. So, I was used to it.
This is a breach of our trust. Do you understand?
Before I could interject, David started talking rapidly. At this point, it was useless to say anything, so I just listened to him for a while. Eventually, he seemed to calm down, and David grew quiet. Now it was my turn to speak.
This morning, I got a call saying Roderick was taken to the hospital. I thought I should let you know right away.
David stared at me blankly.
I tried calling your cell phone multiple times, but I couldn't reach you. So, I contacted your office.
David remained silent.
They told me you didn't have any business trips scheduled. At first, I thought it was a communication error, but
David seemed to be considering what to say.
You came back because it would be problematic if your office was contacted, right? So, where exactly were you planning to go from today?
I pressed him hard. Just as David was about to retort, Roderick appeared from the living room. Why don't you two come over here and talk? David looked surprised to see Roderick.
Oh, Roderick! I thought you were taken to the hospital.
Oh, didn't you hear?
It was a prank call. As you can see, I'm fine.
In a daze, David walked toward the living room. I secretly activated the voice recorder I had in my pocket. In the living room, I confronted David again.
So, what are your plans starting today? It's a business trip, of course.
David was about to shout again. I quickly raised my voice.
The other day.
David flinched a little.
The other day, I heard you brought a woman into our house. Roderick told me.
David glared at Roderick, but Roderick, with his headphones on, was absorbed in a game on his phone and didn't notice.
I explained to Roderick as well. She is just a subordinate who came to retrieve something she forgot while we were out on business.
David's voice was getting agitated again.
That's what it seems. But on another day, you were arguing with that woman, weren't you? That was...
David seemed to be thinking of another excuse.
That has nothing to do with you. I was just giving her work instructions. You have no right to criticize me for every little thing.
As David stood up, intending to yell at me again, Roderick also slowly stood up.
I saw that argument myself. It didn't seem like just work instructions.
Roderick looked down at his father, David, with a disdainful gaze. David, now being looked down upon by Roderick, fell silent under the unprecedented pressure.
This prank call today, it's happened multiple times before.
I quietly handed David a piece of paper with phone numbers written on it.
I've been writing down the numbers from the call history every time.
David looked at the numbers on the paper, visibly shaken.
I want you to check if these numbers are registered on your phone.
David averted his eyes from the paper and said,
I don't know anything about that. It's not that you don't know. Let me check. If you can't do that, call these numbers.
David's attitude confirmed my suspicion. David knew who was behind those calls. As I stepped closer, David sank to the floor, defeated.
I'm in trouble too.
David began to explain in a small voice. It turned out that the woman wasn't just a subordinate to him. She had a family, and they had been involved in a relationship where they both understood the boundaries. But recently, she started pressing him for a divorce, which he wasn't prepared for, causing him distress.
She has a family too, and getting involved with a subordinate was my mistake. I don't want to make a big deal out of it.
So far, there hasn't been any apology directed at me.
I won't see her anymore, so can you help me break up with her?
I didn't respond and instead asked for detailed information about when their relationship started. And everything leading up to the present. David seemed to assume I would cooperate and began sharing everything freely. This is all the truth. Let's work together to end it with her. As if I'd help you. Before I could voice my thoughts, Roderick spoke up to David.
Dad, are you serious? This is the lowest thing you could ever do.
David looked like he was about to cry, glancing between me and Roderick. Seriously, this is the lowest. Who do you think will help you? You got to be kidding me. David looked utterly confused, alternating his gaze between me and Roderick.
I will be taking Roderick and going back to my parents' house. I'll handle the necessary procedures through my lawyer.
With those words, Roderick and I left the scene. A few months later, our divorce was finalized. I submitted recordings from a voice recorder as evidence, and perhaps because David had admitted to the affair himself. He readily agreed to my demands for compensation and child support. However, the woman David had an affair. Ainsworth was problematic. When I sent her a certified letter demanding compensation for the divorce due to her affair with David, she refused. After multiple reminders, the matter escalated to mediation, where she made outrageous statements. She claimed their relationship wasn't an affair but true love. She said there was nothing wrong since she was divorcing her husband to marry David. She even admitted to harassing me but argued it was my fault for not divorcing David sooner. She blamed me for her jealousy and actions, saying it was all my fault for making her do things she normally wouldn't. Ultimately, after David broke up with her, her anger turned towards me, leading to her making a false phone call claiming Roderick was hospitalized. From her perspective, even that was somehow my fault. To top it off, she winked at me during the mediation, saying,
"Thank you for leaving David."
Of course, her arguments didn't hold, and she was ordered to pay the compensation I demanded in the divorce case. I felt a bit sorry for David, realizing he truly was in a difficult situation. Even her husband demanded compensation in their divorce, but she boldly stated,
"Why should I pay? If anything, I should be receiving compensation for wanting the divorce."
After the lawyer explained it clearly, her face turned pale, and I couldn't help but worry about her future. Seeing her write the agreement and the promissory note as instructed by the lawyer, she looked like a child being scolded by their parent while doing homework. David really got involved with a terrible woman. But I no longer had any desire to help or protect David. Everything was finally settled a few months later. The compensation from the divorce settlement with David and Ainsworth was paid in a lump sum, and with that money, Roderick and I left home and started living together. David quit his job. After the divorce, Ainsworth's advances became more aggressive, and their relationship became public within the company, making it difficult for him to stay there. Ainsworth also quit her job, almost stalking David. Concerned about Ainsworth's actions, David has been staying home more often. Even if he tries to find a new job, at his age, it's unlikely he'll find anyone willing to hire him. How do I know so much about my ex-husband? Well, I started working at a fast food restaurant again. Of course, we still deliver to David's old company. I don't make the deliveries, but my coworkers who do always bring back plenty of gossip. There's nothing scarier than rumors, I thought. Thinking that, I started packing up to leave work. Today is Roderick's turn to cook dinner. Now a high school senior, Roderick decided to attend a culinary school and eagerly prepares meals on his cooking days. Although we sometimes cook together, Roderick's culinary skills never cease to amaze me. Even though I've been a housewife for years, he's more efficient and makes tastier food than I do. Before I knew it, eating Roderick's cooking became the highlight of my day. I wonder what he's making for dinner today. As the city begins to dim and the lights in houses start to flicker on, I walk home. I see the light coming from my house and pick up my pace. There's a different kind of happiness in that room now. Smelling the delicious aroma of Roderick's cooking, I opened the door to our home where he was waiting.
"Sarah, there's a burglary happening."
John, my father, shouted in a panic, not realizing that David and Jessica were in the middle of an intimate moment in the basement. He had mistaken their passionate encounter for a break-in and locked the two of them in the room. As John frantically reached for the phone to call the police, I quickly intervened and revealed the shocking truth to him. Upon learning the reality of the situation, John's body trembled with rage, and he decided to summon Michael and the entire family to the basement. I couldn't forgive those two for betraying me. I was determined to make them experience hell. Driven by years of pent-up resentment, I was ready to unleash my wrath upon the unsuspecting couple. My name is Sarah, and I'm a 29-year-old who just got engaged last month. My fiancé, David, was my high school classmate. Although we didn't interact much during our student days, we reconnected after starting our careers. David had joined the workforce before I graduated from college, and he became my mentor at the company, guiding me through my new role.
"I never thought you'd end up working at our company, Sarah. You were a top student with a knack for science, so I assumed you'd pursue a career in that field. I had no idea you were interested in publishing,"
he said. David was incredibly attentive and dedicated to his work. He patiently taught me the ropes and always had my back whenever I made mistakes. Despite being the same age, he felt like a reliable senior colleague, and I couldn't help but admire his dependability. David, you've really changed. Back in high school, you were more timid and unreliable. But now, you're completely different. You're so dependable that it's hard to believe we're the same age, I remarked. When I first joined the company, I addressed David by his last name. He did the same with me, and no one could have imagined that we would become so close.
Hey, calling me timid is a bit harsh. But I guess I was more introverted back in high school, so I can't blame you for thinking that,
he admitted. Everything changed during the welcome and farewell party for new employees. By chance, David and I ended up sitting next to each other, and he struck up a conversation with me. We bonded over nostalgic memories of our student days and discovered that we shared similar interests. Before we knew it, we started hanging out for drinks after work, and soon enough, we were on a first-name basis. As we spent more time together outside of work, I learned that David had an even greater love for books than I had imagined, and that he once aspired to be a novelist. Remember how I used to sit at my desk and write during breaks in high school? I was working on a novel to submit to publishing companies, he revealed. His words triggered a memory of David being honored at a school assembly. The quiet young man who sat at the edge of the classroom had achieved such an incredible feat. It was impossible not to be drawn to him. I was honored at that assembly because my novel had won the grand prize, he explained. I had never been particularly interested in novels. However, the thought of that shy young man pouring his heart and soul into a piece of writing piqued my curiosity. I wanted to see the work he had dedicated so much time and effort to create. And so, driven by mere curiosity, I decided to read his novel. As I delved into the pages, my perspective was completely transformed. The captivating storyline and the masterful craftsmanship left me utterly spellbound. From that moment on, my perception of him completely changed. I abandoned my plans to pursue a career in science and set my sights on working for a publishing company instead. My twin sister, Jessica, who had been following in my footsteps to study science, relentlessly complained about my decision.
Why did you give up on that major tech company, Sarah? Didn't you say you were considering working there?
She questioned, her voice laced with disbelief and frustration. Unlike me, Jessica was a flashy and attention-seeking individual. She belonged to the popular clique in our class, and I often found myself serving as her plain and unremarkable sidekick. When you compare Sarah to Jessica, Jessica looks like a total catch, I overheard our classmates gossiping. I know, right? She's got a great body, and her face is so stunning that it's hard to believe they're actually twins. Sarah's not bad, but Jessica is just too cute to even notice her. Another chimed in, their words dripping with admiration for my sister and dismissal of my own appearance. If I had to choose, I'd definitely go for Jessica. Sarah seems more like a good friend than a girlfriend, you know? A third voice added, cementing my position as the inferior twin in their eyes. Day after day, I endured being compared to Jessica and treated with disdain. Even our parents favored Jessica for her good looks, and our mother, Emily, was particularly blatant in her preferential treatment. While I could only gain attention through my academic achievements, Jessica was showered with praise for the smallest of actions. A little help with household chores earned her glowing compliments, and a mere smile elicited gushing exclamations of how adorable. I found myself both envious and exasperated by the constant fawning over Jessica. The first time I truly recognized the stark contrast in our treatment was back in elementary school. Since Jessica and I shared the same birthday, we always celebrated together. Everyone would rush to congratulate Jessica, while my own birthday wishes always came as an afterthought. Emily was especially cruel in this regard.
Happy birthday, Jessica. Oh, and you too, Sarah. You should try harder in your studies,
she would say, her words devoid of any genuine warmth towards me. While Jessica basked in the exclusive attention and congratulations from Emily, I was left feeling neglected and yearning for my mother's approval. Determined to earn Emily's praise, I threw myself into my studies with a newfound fervor. Miraculously, I managed to achieve a perfect score on a test, a feat that filled me with pride and hope.
If I show this to Emily, surely she'll,
I thought to myself, my heart swelling with anticipation. That day marked our 10th birthday party, a celebration for both Jessica and me. I figured that if I showed Emily my test results before the party began, I might finally receive the congratulations I so desperately craved before Jessica could steal the spotlight once again. With my chest puffed up with excitement, I made my way to the kitchen, only to be greeted by a shocking scene that stopped me dead in my tracks.
Hey, Mom! Look at this! Jessica got a 90 on the test.
My sister's voice rang out, her tone dripping with pride as she waved her test paper in front of Emily's face. To my utter disbelief, Jessica had beaten me to the punch, presenting her own test results first. Normally, Jessica's grades hovered around or below average, so scoring a 90 was an impressive feat for her. There was no way Emily would pass up the opportunity to shower her with praise. And just like that, the congratulatory words I had longed to hear were bestowed upon Jessica instead, leaving me once again overlooked and overshadowed by my twins' achievements.
Jessica is such a hard worker. Maybe I should add an extra turkey to today's birthday party. Or is there a toy you'd like as a reward? We could go shopping for it on your next day off,
Emily gushed, her eyes sparkling with pride as she lavished praise upon my sister.
Emily, I worked hard on the test too. Look,
I stammered, frantically waving my perfect score in front of her face, desperate for a shred of recognition. But the moment Emily's gaze fell upon my test, the smile vanished from her face, replaced by a cold, stern expression that sent shivers down my spine.
Don't get carried away with something like that. Studying is the only thing you're good at, so it's only natural that you can achieve this much, right? What are you getting so excited about? You should consider a perfect score as the norm. Don't come reporting to me every single time,
she snapped, her words cutting through me like a knife. Shocked and at a loss for words, I stood there, my heart sinking into the depths of despair. At the same time, a burning hatred for Jessica began to consume me from within. We were supposed to be twins, yet Jessica was praised so easily while I was treated as if my accomplishments were nothing more than a given, met with cold, dismissive glances. Why was I the only one who had to endure this kind of treatment? Frustrated and resentful beyond words, I couldn't bring myself to celebrate my own birthday, instead retreating to my room and crying my eyes out. In those moments of darkness, my only support came from John, our father, who had become a doctor. John had established his own medical practice around the time I entered middle school and continues to work as a physician to this day.
Sarah, just focus on doing what you love at your own pace. You don't have to listen to what your dad or mom say about your life, you know?
He reassured me, his words a soothing balm to my wounded soul. In the comforting embrace of John's arms, I finally let go of all the pain and sorrow I had been holding back, sobbing uncontrollably as I poured my heart out to him. As long as I had John by my side, I decided, that would be enough. I resolved to stop seeking love and approval from Emily, steeling my heart against any further disappointment. It was in that moment of clarity that John's voice interrupted my thoughts.
Sarah, take a look at this. There were dandelions blooming by the side of the road. Isn't that amazing?
He exclaimed, his eyes wide with childlike wonder. You see, John had a tendency to be quite out of touch with common sense. He would confidently point at a sunflower and call it a dandelion, or spot a coyote and shout about a squirrel sighting. He just had a way of being on a completely different wavelength from everyone else. But it was that very quirkiness that never failed to bring a smile to my face, even in my darkest moments. However, Jessica would always glare at us with envious eyes, unable to stand the sight of my happiness. She had a habit of coveting and taking away anything that belonged to me. Consumed by a fierce jealousy whenever I possessed something better than her. This ugly truth became glaringly apparent to me during my middle school years. At the time, I had started dating a boyfriend who was way out of my league in terms of his impressive qualities. He was academically brilliant and excelled in sports, the kind of guy I never thought would give me a second glance. When he confessed his feelings for me, I was so shocked that I thought I must be dreaming. I fell for you because of how diligently you studied, even during breaks. While everyone else was goofing around, you ignored them and kept working hard. I thought that was really cool. I didn't want to lose to someone like you, Sarah, so I've been studying like crazy to maintain my grades. He admitted, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment as he shared his admiration for me. His words filled my heart with a warm, fuzzy feeling, and I couldn't help but fall even deeper in love with him. Thanks to his influence, I finally learned to embrace and appreciate the studious side of myself. I vowed to cherish and treasure our relationship, determined to make it work. But just as I was basking in the glow of our newfound happiness, Jessica had to come along and ruin everything. I'm sorry. I kissed Jessica. My boyfriend confessed, his voice heavy with guilt and regret. His sudden confession left me speechless, my mind reeling as I struggled to process the words that had just left his lips. As I stood there, grasping for a coherent response, Jessica stepped in between us, shielding him from my inevitable wrath.
It's not his fault. I couldn't help but fall for him. I just couldn't let him go. So please, don't blame him. If you want to blame someone, blame me.
She pleaded, her voice laced with a sickening sweetness that made my stomach churn. No, Jessica, this is all on me. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I think we should break up. He interjected, his words twisting the knife that had already been plunged into my heart. The entire situation reeked of a poorly staged performance, a charade designed to mask their betrayal. Blinded by my own pain, I failed to notice the triumphant smirk that played across Jessica's lips as she reveled in my suffering. Unable to bear another moment in their presence, I turned on my heel and fled, my feet carrying me as far away from them as possible. For weeks afterward, I couldn't bring myself to set foot in school. The thought of seeing them together in the same classroom, of having to pretend that everything was fine, was more than I could bear. It wasn't until I had finally managed to regain some semblance of composure that I found the strength to return. As fate would have it, I overheard a conversation between Jessica and our classmates that shattered any remaining illusions I might have had. Damn, Jessica's a real piece of work, stealing her sister's boyfriend like that. Who does that? That's just messed up. One of them remarked, his voice dripping with disgust.
But it pissed me off, you know? Like, how could Sarah, with her inferior looks, manage to snag such a high-quality boyfriend? It just didn't sit right with me.
Jessica retorted, her words laced with venom.
I mean, Jessica's way cuter and prettier. That's the only reason I took him. If he had noticed Jessica from the start, there's no way he would have fallen for Sarah.
Another classmate chimed in, her tone laced with a cruel amusement. Dude, she's scary. I don't ever want to get on her bad side. A third voice added, a nervous chuckle punctuating his words. As I watched Jessica laughing crudely with the boys, a sense of utter despair washed over me. It was clear that she had never truly cared for him at all. Her actions had been driven by nothing more than pure jealousy, a spiteful desire to rob me of the happiness I had found. I tried to tell my ex-boyfriend the truth, to make him see the kind of person Jessica really was. But he refused to listen, instead choosing to confront Jessica with my accusations. From that moment on, until the day I graduated middle school, I found myself the target of Jessica's relentless bullying and harassment. I had hoped that graduation would finally grant me the freedom I so desperately craved. But just as I was beginning to allow myself to dream of a brighter future, a new wave of despair came crashing down upon me. Jessica, it seemed, had decided to enroll in the same high school as me. Despite her initial plans to attend a different school, she had somehow caught wind of my choice and, like a malevolent shadow, had followed me there. My ex-boyfriend, who had chosen to attend a different high school, had outlived his usefulness and been promptly discarded by Jessica. From that point on, I resigned myself to a life of mediocrity, going through the motions day after day with no real sense of purpose or drive. It wasn't until I witnessed David's unwavering dedication and passion that something began to stir within me once more. Thanks to his influence, I found the courage to pursue my dreams, and to my amazement, I was offered a position at the publishing company I had always aspired to work for. Emily was furious when she learned that I had changed my career path without her consent, but John's intervention saved me from being thrown out of the house altogether. As my savings grew and my relationship with David blossomed, I finally felt ready to break free from Jessica's toxic influence once and for all. With David by my side, I took the leap and started a new chapter in my life, moving out on my own and leaving the past behind me. And so, after 5 years of being together, David and I decided to get engaged. When I introduced him to my parents to seek their blessing, their response was even more enthusiastic than I had anticipated. Emily, in particular, took an immediate liking to David, and the two of them engaged in lively conversation, their laughter filling the house with a warmth that had been absent for far too long. As they chatted away merrily, Jessica sat in the corner, her eyes narrowed in jealousy as she watched the joyful scene unfold before her. From that day forward, David became a frequent visitor to our home. My parents grew to love him like a true son, and he was even invited to join our extended family gatherings for Christmas.
Why don't we invite David's parents and relatives too? My dad and mom love having a big, lively crowd around, so I'm sure they'd be thrilled.
John suggested, his eyes twinkling with excitement. My paternal grandmother, who had been running a restaurant, had recently announced that she would be closing down the business that winter. As a final hurrah, the entire family had planned to come together for one last celebration, a Christmas party that would double as a tribute to my grandparents and all they had accomplished. Initially, David's parents had been hesitant to join, not wanting to impose, but with a little encouragement from my grandparents, they eventually agreed to come along. With David's relatives also in attendance, that year's Christmas party was a grand affair, filled with more people than ever before. Do you think we have enough drinks? If we run out, I can always make a quick run to the store. Just make sure to tell David and the others not to hold back, okay? Emily fretted, her brow furrowed with concern. It's all right, Emily. I heard some of David's relatives are bringing plenty of their own drinks, so there's no need to worry. I reassured her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Having only ever had serious conversations with Emily about my studies, I found myself feeling nervous at the prospect of engaging in casual chatter with her. But as my relationship with David deepened, Emily began to take a more active interest in my life, and we found ourselves talking more and more. It was through these conversations that I discovered just how much of a worrier Emily truly was. Despite having meticulously planned every detail in advance, she would still find herself fretting and fussing on the day of the event, her nerves getting the better of her. Seeing this unexpected side of her helped to ease some of the tension I had always felt in her presence. On the day of the party, Emily was her usual restless self, bustling about as she made last-minute preparations. As I worked alongside her, she suddenly paused and smiled wistfully.
Come to think of it, you were always right there by my side, worrying about me.
She mused, her voice tinged with nostalgia.
What?
I asked, caught off guard by her sudden declaration. As I stood there, stunned by her words, Emily's expression shifted to one of bittersweet sadness as she began to recount tales from our past.
Even though I scolded you every day, you never let it get you down. You'd always come to me and ask, Mom, is there anything I can help with, while Jessica was off playing somewhere?
She reminisced, her eyes distant as she lost herself in the memories. You spent more time by my side than you did playing. I realized then that I was making you worry about me. I knew I was being cold to you, Sarah. I knew I was doing a terrible thing. She confessed, her voice heavy with regret. As Emily spoke, abruptly pouring her heart out to me while preparing the steaks, I listened in silence, absorbing every word. At first, I was strict with Jessica. She was the older sister, but she was always taking things from you, wasn't she? Your birthday presents, your snacks, anything she could get her hands on. I couldn't let her keep doing that to you. She explained, her eyes filling with a fierce protectiveness. There was a time when I was really hard on her. But the harsher I was with Jessica, the worse she treated you. She revealed, her voice trembling with emotion. Her words hit me like a bombshell. As I thought back, I remembered how, in the beginning, Emily would fix Jessica with a stern glare whenever she stole one of my toys. There were even a few times when she scolded her right in front of me. But then, at some point, it all stopped abruptly, and before I knew it, I had become the target of Emily's ire. Instead of trying to reason with the disobedient Jessica, Emily had chosen to restrain me, to keep me out of harm's way. She had taken advantage of my docile nature, she admitted, her voice heavy with pain and regret. I'm sorry, Sarah. I've been a terrible mother, putting you through so much pain and suffering. Emily whispered, her voice heavy with regret and sincerity. As I listened to her explanation and heard her apology for the first time, tears welled up in my eyes, threatening to spill over at any moment. Seeing my emotional state, Emily paused in her work and asked me to wait for a moment before disappearing into our grandmother's room. When she returned, she held something in her hands, presenting it to me with a tenderness that caught me off guard. As my gaze fell upon the item she held, the tears I had been holding back burst forth, streaming down my face as I struggled to comprehend the reality before me.
This is the first perfect score you ever got on a test, back when you were in elementary school. Do you remember? You went out of your way to show it to me on your birthday. I was so proud of you then, even if I didn't show it.
Emily revealed, her voice trembling with emotion.
You had never tried to seek praise or attention before, but that day, you took the initiative to express yourself. This test is a precious treasure to me.
She continued, clutching the paper to her chest as tears gathered in her own eyes. Keeping it at home risked Jessica discovering and potentially destroying it. So Emily had entrusted our grandparents with safeguarding this precious memento. Learning this truth, I finally allowed myself to break down, sobbing into Emily's embrace like a child seeking comfort. The realization that I had been loved so deeply all along. That Emily had been watching over me and supporting me in her own way. And the struggles she had faced as a mother, it all came crashing down on me in that moment. I felt a profound sense of gratitude for having the opportunity to hear Emily's true feelings before embarking on my own marriage. With the air cleared between us, I thought the Christmas party would conclude without any further incidents. As the festivities wound down and the guests began to succumb to the effects of alcohol, I noticed Jessica slipping out of the banquet hall, trailing after David, who had excused himself to use the restroom. A sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach, urging me to follow them, but before I could make a move, Michael called out to me, inviting me to join him for a drink. Unable to refuse his request, I found myself trapped, forced to spend some time indulging in beer with Michael and his companions. After a while, I seized the opportunity to escape when Michael and the others got up to refill their glasses, making my way out of the banquet hall in search of David and Jessica. To my surprise, despite supposedly heading to the restroom, there was no sign of them on the first floor. The third floor housed our grandparents' private residence, and the door was securely locked. There were no restrooms on the second floor, leaving only one possible location. Puzzled by their absence, I began to explore the area, my mind racing with possibilities.
So, what do you think? I'm the better woman, aren't I?
It was then that I heard Jessica's voice drifting up from the stairwell leading to the kitchen. The stairs by the kitchen led down to the basement, where the wine cellar was located. Jessica typically avoided alcohol, so what could she possibly be doing in the wine cellar? Moreover, I could hear another voice mingling with hers, indicating that she wasn't alone. Suspicion gnawing at my mind, I made my way down to the basement, only to be greeted by a conversation that left me reeling in disbelief.
David should just be honest with himself. Everyone else already prefers me over Sarah, so why fight it?
Jessica's voice echoed, filled with a smug confidence.
Wait, no. We can't. If Sarah finds out about this.
David's panicked protest reached my ears, his words laced with fear and guilt.
After everything we've done, you're going to back out now? You can't just let a woman like me go this far and then leave me hanging. Are you trying to humiliate me? Or maybe you're into the whole forceful thing?
Jessica taunted, her voice dripping with a dangerous allure. The voice I heard alongside Jessica's belonged to none other than David. Unable to process the unbelievable situation unfolding before me, I stood frozen in front of the door, my mind reeling with shock and disbelief. I knew I needed to see for myself, to confirm what was happening inside, but the fear of what I might discover kept me rooted to the spot, unable to muster the courage to push the door open. Gradually, the sound of Jessica's nasally voice and David's heavy breathing grew louder, and a wave of despair washed over me, plunging my world into darkness. The David I had trusted so completely, the man I had placed all my faith in, was no different from my ex-boyfriend in the end. He had succumbed to Jessica's scheming, just as she had planned all along. Faced with this harsh reality, any love I had felt for him evaporated in an instant.
In the end, David is just like the rest of them.
I muttered to myself, a hollow smile playing across my lips as I sank to the ground, my legs no longer able to support my weight. I had truly believed that David loved me unconditionally, that his devotion to me was unshakable, but here he was, so easily ensnared by Jessica's charms. It was pathetic, really, and I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. It seemed that no matter who they were, the moment Jessica entered the picture, men were helpless to resist her allure. No one truly cared about me, no one valued me for who I was. With that realization, a single tear slipped down my cheek, a stark contrast to the empty smile that still lingered on my face. Steeling my resolve, I slowly pushed the door open, confirming with my own eyes the scene I had already imagined in my mind. The two of them were so lost in their passionate embrace that they failed to notice my presence, their bodies tangled together in a sickening display of betrayal. Fighting back the bile that rose in my throat, I reached for my phone with trembling hands. Aiming the camera in their direction, I captured the damning evidence of their affair, recording every moment of their betrayal before fleeing the scene and locking myself in the nearest restroom. As I struggled to keep my composure, I silently congratulated myself for having the foresight to gather proof, my mind already racing with thoughts of what to do next. It was then that John emerged from the direction of the basement, his face etched with panic as he rushed towards me.
"Sarah, there's a burglary happening!"
he exclaimed, grabbing me by the shoulders as he blurted out his shocking revelation. Utterly baffled by his sudden outburst, I tried to calm him down and make sense of the situation, prompting him to explain further. "Emily said she wanted some wine, so she asked me to fetch a bottle from the wine cellar. I remembered we had some vintage wines stored down there. But when I went to the basement just now, I heard some strange noises." He rambled, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush.
"Our restaurant is closed, so I thought it must be a burglar who snuck in to steal our wine, thinking no one would be around. I locked the door from the outside to trap them inside, so let's call the police. I'll go tell Emily and the others."
John continued, his voice rising with each word. In his panicked state, John had failed to realize that the burglars he had trapped in the basement were none other than David and Jessica. But for me, this turn of events worked in my favor. Knowing that the two of them were now trapped and unable to easily escape, I stopped John from calling the police and instead filled him in on what I had just witnessed. Together, we returned to the banquet hall to share this shocking revelation with the rest of the family. An hour later, as David and Jessica finally finished their sordid affair and attempted to leave the basement, they found themselves faced with an unexpected obstacle.
"What the? The door won't open,"
Jessica muttered, her brow furrowing in confusion.
"What?"
David replied, his voice laced with a growing sense of unease. Realizing that they had been locked inside, the two of them began to panic, their voices rising in a frantic cacophony of fear and desperation. Seizing the moment, I flung the door open with a force that startled them both, my eyes blazing with a fury that could no longer be contained.
"David, what the hell do you think you're doing?"
As the two of them emerged from the wine cellar, they were greeted by the sight of Michael and the rest of the family, all glaring at them with a mixture of shock and disgust.
"Dad? What are you doing here?"
Jessica stammered, her face draining of color as she took in the sea of angry faces before her.
"Don't give me that bullshit. What the hell were you doing in there?"
Michael roared, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. Judging by their ashen faces, it was clear that neither Jessica nor David had anticipated the entire family gathering outside the room the moment they stepped out. Unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation, they simply stood there, opening and closing their mouths like fish out of water, unable to utter a single word in their defense.
"How do you plan on explaining this situation? Don't even think about trying to claim that nothing happened, because we won't buy it,"
I said coldly, my words cutting through the tense silence like a knife. At the sound of my voice, Jessica's head snapped in my direction, her eyes narrowing into a venomous glare.
"What the hell is going on here? Are you the one who locked us in the wine cellar?"
she demanded, her tone dripping with accusation, as if I were the villain in this twisted scenario. Despite the anger bubbling up inside me at her audacity to play the victim, I kept my composure, crossing my arms and looking down at her with a mixture of pity and disdain. "Don't get it twisted. It was John who locked the door, not me. I only heard about the situation from him. More importantly, what were you two doing down here in the first place?" I questioned, my voice laced with a sickening sweetness.
You were cozied up together in the wine cellar for over an hour. Could it be that you were engaging in some suspicious activities?
I pressed on, relishing in the way their faces paled even further at my insinuation.
What? What the hell are you talking about? Stop making baseless accusations. David mentioned he was interested in wine, so I was just showing him around and unlocking the room.
Jessica stammered, her words tumbling out in a panicked rush as she tried to defend herself against my allegations. Hearing her flimsy excuse, a bold, fearless smile spread across my face as I stepped closer to her, my eyes glinting with a wicked satisfaction.
Oh, is that so? That's strange because I was under the impression that David hated wine.
I mused, my voice dripping with mock confusion.
What?
Jessica breathed, her eyes widening in shock as the realization began to dawn on her.
He tried it once a long time ago and couldn't stand the taste. Since then, he can't even handle the smell of it. He's even complained about it to my parents before.
I explained, my words driving the final nail into her coffin of lies. Trapped by her own deceit, Jessica began to panic, her face growing paler by the second as she struggled to come up with another excuse. Beside her, David was visibly sweating, his brow furrowed in concentration as he desperately tried to think of a way to talk his way out of this mess. Unwilling to let them off the hook so easily, I pulled out my phone, ready to deliver the final blow that would shatter any remaining hope they had of escaping this unscathed.
If you had been honest from the start, maybe things would be different. But since you're so determined to lie your way out of this, I guess I have no choice.
Do you know what this is? I asked, my voice dripping with a sickening sweetness.
That's...
Jessica gasped, her eyes widening in horror as she realized what I was holding.
What the...
David choked out, his face draining of color as he stared at the screen in disbelief. There, playing on my phone, was a video of the two of them engaged in their earlier tryst. Their passionate moans and cries of ecstasy filling the air as their faces were clearly visible in the footage. Faced with irrefutable evidence of their betrayal, the two of them completely lost their composure, descending into a full-blown panic. Reveling in their misery, I couldn't help but laugh at their pathetic display, my words dripping with a mocking provocation.
I thought you said you were just showing him the wine. What exactly is going on here? I'm just a dumb girl, so I don't really understand.
Hey, big sis, care to enlighten me? What were you two doing down here? I asked, my voice laced with a sickening sweetness.
No, it's not what it looks like. David forced me into it. He lured me down here and took advantage of me.
Jessica blurted out, quickly turning on David and painting him as the sole perpetrator now that she realized there was no way to deny what had happened. David, caught off guard by her sudden betrayal, opened his mouth to defend himself. And soon the two of them were engaged in a vicious back and forth, each trying to shift the blame onto the other.
That's not true. When I went to use the restroom, Jessica followed me and dragged me down here. She kept saying that she's liked me long before Sarah did and started coming on to me. She even started taking her clothes off on her own.
David shouted, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and desperation.
I tried to refuse at first, but then she threatened me, saying, "Are you trying to humiliate me?" I didn't know what to do. I couldn't bring myself to push her away, and before I knew it, things had gone too far.
He rambled on, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush.
I'm so sorry, Sarah. It was a momentary lapse in judgment. I deeply regret what I've done. Please forgive me.
David pleaded, tears streaming down his face as he begged for my forgiveness. Seeing him reduced to such a pitiful state, my expression twisted in pain, and the words I had been holding back finally spilled from my lips. I trusted you. I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of my own heart shattering into a million pieces.
What?
David asked, his eyes widening in shock as he struggled to process the weight of my words. I thought David was different. I believed he only had eyes for me. I whispered, my voice trembling with the weight of my shattered dreams.
I'm so sorry, Sarah. This is all my fault.
David mumbled, his head down in shame as he pressed his forehead against the ground, repeating his apologies over and over again, as if the mere act of groveling could somehow erase the pain he had caused. But with each apology that fell from his lips, I could feel my heart growing colder, the last embers of my love for him fading into nothingness. No matter how much he begged, I knew I could never bring myself to feel the same way about him again.
If you cared about me at all, you would have cherished me and resisted Jessica's advances, no matter what.
I said softly, my words laced with a bitter disappointment that cut deeper than any knife.
I only love you, Sarah. Please believe me. You're the most important person in my life.
David pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation as he reached out to me, his hands trembling with the weight of his guilt.
Shut up, you disgraceful piece of shit!
Michael roared, slapping David's outstretched hand away with a force that sent him stumbling backward. Michael was a man of unwavering integrity, fiercely loyal to his wife and utterly disgusted by infidelity and any form of promiscuity. The fact that his own son had stooped to such deplorable behavior was more than he could bear. With a face twisted in rage, he fixed David with a glare that could have frozen hell itself, his words dripping with venom as he tore into him without mercy.
No matter what your reasons may be, to make the person you claim to love suffer like this. You're a failure as a husband and as a man. Someone who can't even cherish one woman has no right to speak of love.
Michael bellowed, his voice shaking with barely contained fury.
That's right. Do you even understand the gravity of what you've done?
Another relative chimed in, their words laced with disgust and condemnation.
To think you could still utter such words after we've seen this. You've got some nerve.
A third voice added, their tone dripping with disdain. As Michael's family joined in the chorus of condemnation, their voices rising in a cacophony of anger and disappointment, it became clear that they shared his intolerance for deception and betrayal. Perhaps it was because Michael himself was so steadfastly against straying from the righteous path that he found David's weakness in the face of another woman's advances so utterly unforgivable. Faced with the full weight of his family's fury, David crumpled under the onslaught of their words, collapsing to the ground in a pathetic heap as he struggled to find the words to defend himself.
That's right. Even if I was the one who approached him, none of this would have happened if David had just firmly rejected me.
Jessica interjected, her voice dripping with a sickening sweetness that made my stomach churn.
The problem isn't that I made a move on him, but that he was too weak to refuse me. You should be reflecting on your own shortcomings, not blaming others. I was only trying to test the depth of your love for Sarah.
She continued, her words so utterly divorced from reality that everyone present could only stare at her in disbelief, their eyes wide with shock at the sheer audacity of her claims.
What the hell are you saying?
I asked, my voice barely above a whisper as I struggled to wrap my mind around the utter nonsense spewing from her mouth. In response, Jessica reached out and grasped my hand, her eyes shining with a twisted sort of pride as she spoke, as if she truly believed she had been acting in my best interests all along.
Sarah, I'm so sorry. If only I had realized sooner what a fickle man David was, I could have spared you this heartache. I never imagined he could be such a spineless, pathetic excuse for a human being.
She cooed, her voice dripping with false sympathy that made my skin crawl.
From now on, I'll be the one to find you a man truly worthy of your love. So promise me you won't fall for any more trash like him, okay? Just listen to what I say, and everything will be fine.
She continued, her words so utterly delusional that I could feel my patience wearing thinner with each passing second. Just as I was about to open my mouth to put her in her place, a dull thud echoed through the wine cellar, the sound of flesh striking flesh with a force that left everyone stunned.
Don't you dare pretend you were doing this for Sarah's sake. How dare you spout such utter bullshit?
Emily roared, her hand still raised from the slap she had just delivered to Jessica's face. Jessica stood there, her mouth agape as she cradled her reddened cheek, too shocked by the sudden pain to utter a single word in her own defense. But Emily was far from finished, her eyes blazing with a fury that I had never seen before as she continued to tear into my sister without mercy.
Acting for Sarah's benefit? Don't make me laugh. You've never done a single thing for her sake in your entire life. To think you could do something so despicable and still try to shift the blame onto others.
She seethed, her words dripping with a venom that left Jessica trembling in the face of her wrath.
No one is buying your lies anymore. I won't let you pull a stunt like this ever again. From now on, I'll be the one protecting Sarah. So do us all a favor and stay the hell away from her.
Emily declared, her voice ringing with a fierce protectiveness that brought tears to my eyes. It was the first time I had ever seen her unleash such raw, unbridled anger on Jessica, the first time she had stood up for me so clearly and unequivocally. Overwhelmed by the sheer force of her love and the depth of her commitment to my well-being, I couldn't help but choke back a sob, my heart swelling with a gratitude that I had never known before.
What do you mean? You're trying to act like a proper mother now after being so harsh on Sarah all this time? Just because the relatives are watching, you're putting on a good face. I'm the way I am because you pampered me, and I can't measure my worth any other way because you kept comparing me to Sarah. Stop acting like you're not at fault.
Emily, shocked by these words, looked taken aback, and John stepped in front of Jessica to protect Emily.
You're right, we might have raised you the wrong way. But did Emily ever say it was okay for you to do this? Do you think Sarah would be happy seeing you act like this? Every time you get scolded, you use someone as a shield to escape getting hurt. You're just a coward, always running away, blaming others. Everything you're facing now is because of what you've sown.
It was the first time John yelled at her, and Jessica, trembling in fear. I had never heard such a low, intimidating voice from John, who usually seemed out of touch with common sense. Even I was taken aback, and my tears stopped.
You've crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed as a human. You will be punished accordingly. Punished?
Seeing John's serious expression, Jessica trembled, wondering what he would say.
From now on, we won't take care of you. You are banned from contacting any relatives. There is no one in this house to help you anymore. Live on your own. Never show your face again. What?
Jessica was speechless at this unexpected statement. The relatives nodded in agreement with John's words.
I've already talked to everyone. You have no allies left. Pack your things and leave this house immediately. No, wait. I have nowhere to go. I don't care. If you're saying it's our fault for pampering you, then we'll treat you harshly from now on. So leave. Never come back to this house.
Wait. Please. Sarah, I'm sorry. I won't do this again. I'm reflecting on my actions. So please, convince Dad and Mom. Don't abandon me. We're the only twin sisters. I don't want such a sad farewell. Please, forgive me?" Realizing the gravity of the situation, Jessica cried and apologized, desperately clinging to my sleeve. But my feelings didn't waver, and I shook off her hand.
"It's too late to cry now. It's disgusting. I've never thought of you as my sister, not even for a moment."
"What?"
"Neither you nor David should ever appear before me again. If you do, I'll make you see hell. And I'll definitely demand compensation in court from both of you. Don't think you can get away with this by crying. Wait. Please, Sarah. Listen to me."
Hearing about the court compensation, Jessica turned pale and desperately reached out to stop me. But my parents blocked her path, and Michael and the relatives glared at her, all of them giving her cold stares. Seeing this, she seemed to give up, and with a powerless drop of her head, I left the scene. Thus, I ended my engagement with David and cut off my sisterly ties with Jessica. After that, I sued Jessica for compensation. As John declared, Jessica was disowned. She was also criticized by all the relatives, which must have taken a toll on her mentally. She didn't talk back. However, when it came time to actually kick her out, she seemed to realize the seriousness and kept begging for forgiveness in front of the house. But no one listened to Jessica's pleas, and the neighbors, disturbed by the noise, called the police. When Jessica heard the police sirens, she got scared and fled the house, seeking refuge at a friend's place. Learning about this, I decided to spread the incident among our classmates and acquaintances to further corner her. I gave her a taste of her own medicine. Consequently, those who knew the details stopped sheltering Jessica, labeled her as a person lacking compassion, and severed ties with her. Jessica is now reportedly living a poor life in the mountains of Dallas. David, too, faced cold stares from high school classmates and lost his friendships. Everyone treated him with caution, keeping their distance to avoid any trouble. Moreover, news of the broken engagement spread among his colleagues, making it awkward for him to continue working, so he quit his job in haste. Lacking any particular skills, he's now struggling to find a new job. However, I have no intention of forgiving him. I sued him for compensation, including the cancellation fee for the wedding venue I had booked, and with Michael's help, I now receive monthly payments into my account. Thus, I succeeded in clearing my ties with both of them. I left the apartment I was living in alone and returned to my parents' house, living happily with them. Hey, Sarah. How about this? I think it would look good on you.
Mom, I'm already 30. Just because I couldn't wear it as a child, don't bring clothes with teddy bear patches. Rather, where did you even find that? I'm surprised they make such things for adults.
Emily started filling in the lost time with me, and John smiled warmly as he watched us. Seeing the smiles of those two became my happiness.